In a meeting, they might sit back and be more reserved. But in a escape room, they feel it's okay to step up and do something different. It opens up, wow, there's something else there that maybe I haven't seen or we as a team haven't seen that person tap into.
Welcome to the Optimized Workplace. I'm your host, Fran Bishop, where our discussions with influencers, experts, and innovators are transforming the well-being and sustainability of today's workplaces and spaces. Today, I'm welcoming Chris Whaley to the show. So welcome, Chris.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Fran.
Chris's passion is bringing people together from diverse backgrounds and disciplines to accomplish what they do not think is possible. I love that. He enjoys taking on strategic challenges and working through those tactical implications with a strong focus on creating the bottom line impact and making a difference in the world and spaces that his clients reside in. He created Escape to Expand. I also love that name, Escape to Expand. So you'll definitely have to unpack that for us, Chris, to help companies achieve their mission while building an engaging personal experience for people to develop high-performing teams. So again, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fran. It's very good, again, to be speaking with you and to get to talk about what I'm doing and maybe see how that hits on some of the things you've been working on.
Well, that's a great place to start because I'm really intrigued with the name of your organization. And I get that you're very entrenched in helping people with their organization. But can you unpack that a little bit for us? What does it mean, Escape to Expand? And how did you come up with that name?
First of all, it was available as a .com. So that, that's part of the screening process. But the inspiration came first and then the .com check comes after that. It's really about escaping the confusion that happens sometimes when you're in a team, whether it's a new team or an existing team or a team that's in change, and expanding your horizons with that team. So how do you escape the confusion and expand your horizons as a team? And there's also a fun play there because I've got a nice 30-question team survey I use to help teams see what their strengths and areas for improvement or opportunities for improvement are. But I also used escape rooms, which is something that I had a chance to be part of as a VP of HR. And we did an escape room just as something fun. It wasn't part of the official agenda other than just to get everybody out of a room and have fun. And then I started reflecting afterwards that there were actually some really interesting things that happened from a team dynamics perspective that happen in something like an escape room that don't often happen in a management team meeting. For example, maybe more junior people on the team stepping up and taking charge, where in a meeting they might sit back and be more reserved. But in a kind of fun escape room, they feel it's okay to step up and do something different. And so you see sometimes team members behaving a little differently, maybe positive, maybe negative, depending on your perspective. But it opens up, wow, there's something else there that maybe I haven't seen or we as a team haven't seen that person tap into. And so that's also where that kind of expand your horizons come from, is to realize within yourself sometimes or within other team members, what are some things there that maybe you haven't realized were there all along?
I really appreciated what you said in twofold. And I definitely want to hear more about how you even came to this place in terms of helping teams in this way, in terms of experiences. But I love what you were saying about helping those that are kind of a bit more reticent to maybe stepping up. Maybe they're an emerging leader or a new leader, or they're taking on something new. Just coincidentally, I delivered a keynote this morning to a group, and they had a lot of quiet people in the room, and they were all leaders. And so after those nuggets of wisdom came up from people who always share, right? You always get the people in the front of the room that love to share what they love to say. I remember back in the day when I used to teach fitness classes a lot, I always said, it's not the people in the first two rows, because the people in the first two rows want to be in my spot, right? They want to teach everybody, but it's the people in the last two rows. So I always reserve at the end of the conversation, the debrief of, okay, those who didn't get to share their wisdom yet, please share your wisdom. So I love the fact that you're tapping into the emerging, or I like to say the quiet but wise leaders in the room. But help us a little bit understand, how did you arrive at this? Because I think that there are so many different nuances to coaching these days and helping teams and helping leaders. How did you arrive at this particular niche? Because it's very interesting.
I am actually an engineer by training. So a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering and a master's
Wow.
degree in industrial engineering. And I ended up working in some more technical fields, but I ended up as a project engineer at Philips, Royal Philips. So I always had that engineering mindset. I want to know the reasons why things work the way they do. And the nice benefit of working with a large company like Philips is we employed lots of consultants. So I got to see lots of different ways that people would come and try to pitch at us for improving strategy or improving processes or improving teamwork. At one point, I had the opportunity to be the senior engagement leader for Philips at that time. It was about 120,000 people. We were moving between HR leaders, and we didn't have a lead for engagement. And so even though I was in one sector or one part of Philips, I was kind of nominated to lead the search for a new engagement partner for us. And so that was a lot of working also with the HR teams in multiple groups, but looking and seeing what are the types of surveys that we've used in the past. What's happening out there in the industry that, maybe we're using older models that aren't as up to date in terms of understanding engagement drivers as we were using at the time. And so I started delving more and more into the analytics side and where these questions come from and, getting to the why things work the way they do. And so that really helped me understand that there are some very practical, kind of simple questions sometimes that you can ask people to uncover these things that sometimes people don't want to talk about in person. And of course, that's using an anonymous survey typically to help.
Yes.
And of course, people need to know that there's trust and that their opinions are anonymous. But at the end, we want people to talk about why they said what they said, because we want to be able to improve those things.
So quick question for you. So did I guess your avenue to get here, obviously through the engineering and the intrigue around that and helping people, in these different sectors of a, very large enterprise, were there any particular trends that you found in particular that I guess force people? Because a lot of times when people approach coaching or training, it's because there's a stuck or there's a, as a leader, you're stuck somewhere or the organization is stuck or it's, things are just not processing. Productivity is not where it should be. So were there any particular, I guess, trends that you noticed in that large enterprise that drove you to, the work that you're in now?
We were driving lots of big transformations, and even Philips today continues, even though they're a focused healthcare company. So they no longer do lighting or televisions. They've spun those divisions off. But what you saw was there's always a lot of focus on leadership development, and that's typically individual. We put people, even if it's a group cohort, we're talking about developing them as a leader. We don't often talk about how do we develop a team together. We assume we've empowered the leader to take that step and then be the leader and be the one that's in charge of the team development. And many times that's the case. But what we saw was we actually empower the team to be responsible for the team's well-being. It's not just the leaders on the leader's shoulders. It's every member of the team. Now, different people are going to have a different role. And obviously, we want to respect the leader at the end of the day. But if the leader is listening to the team, hopefully they're also respecting, what the team's saying and seeing how they can incorporate that into the situation. And so for me, that was kind of the tipping point, that lots of great leadership development out there. But if you omit bringing the team into that discussion and not just leaving it on the leader's shoulders, you miss a big part of the conversation and a big part of then the potential positive outcome or, expanding the horizons that can happen when you really involve the whole team as a whole instead of as a leader and the followers.
Yeah, that's music to my ears. I feel very strongly of what you're saying, that there's so much power in the collective, right? So much more power in the collective. And I talk a lot about tribes and your tribe that supports you, whether that, tribe is your community or that tribe is your work, culture, or that tribe is your, home, family life, whatever it is. And maybe you have multiple tribes. But so often, the A type or the really successful or the leaders that are trying to become more and more successful are trying to do it all themselves.
Right.
And there's a great book by the founder of Compass, and he speaks about the fact that nobody succeeds alone. Like you have to have support from your tribe. So empowering others to empower others. So you're not the only person doing the empowerment. Otherwise, you're going to burn out, right? There's no way around it that you're not going to just burn yourself to the ground. But if you're empowering others and empowering your team to be even better, that amplifies you even beyond. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about the role of a leader is to develop new leaders. And what better way than to let people start taking those leadership positions early? It's not once you get anointed by someone that you're now a manager and now, ta-da, you're a leader. It doesn't work that way. You can be a leader and not have anybody reporting into you, and not be the boss of anyone, but you can still be a leader, and you can be a manager and absolutely not be a leader. So there's definitely those two different conditions that can exist.
Tell us a little bit about that. What size organizations do you work with? What size teams do you work with, Chris?
Really, who I'm working with are a lot of smaller, sometimes they're startups or startups that have been around for a while that are getting ready to hire that middle management layer for the first time. It's actually more, that's the sweet spot. I think it's when people are now putting in that middle manager for the first time. They now no longer know everybody in the organization. They can't have their finger in every pot. How do they start to trust and empower the team? And how does the team also do the same? And that's really where I found that these teachings, they work well for a brand new team of 4 or 5 people. You can scale them to an organization of tens of thousands if you want to. But for me and my practice, kind of that the smaller organizations that are really taking that next step have been the ones that I felt I had the chance to be the most impactful with.
And what's the largest team you've ever taken into one of your escape room experiences? What was the outcome that you saw? Were there any shifts?
Yes. So I've done it several times, and usually you can do a physical escape room, which are usually great. Most cities have one you can go to. And so I don't, run an escape room location that people go to. That's, to me, there's great ones already out there. So I use those. I can bring an escape room in a box if someone's wanting to do an offsite and kind of simulate a few things. But honestly, it's not as fun as going out there in the room. But you can also do them virtually now. So it's really opened up the ability with remote teams, and you don't want to bring people together, or they don't want to get together, or they can't get together. You can still do some of these things. But some of the fun things I found is, you've got the leaders, and they step in the room, and the way most escape rooms are set up, there are multiple puzzles, and it's not always obvious what goes with what. So you always have people usually breaking up into groups of 2 or 3, and they're trying to solve whatever they think they're trying to solve. And you really start to see, well, who's communicating? Who takes that role to step in between the different groups? Hey, did you see that thing over there? Maybe does that have something to do with what you're looking for? Versus people, they just get their I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I'm ignoring the other people in the room. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you step out, and we say, okay, did anybody notice something there that reflects back on? In this case, we were having some issues, and I said, did you see behaviors in the escape room that reminded you of this other issue? And once they step back, I saw we were over there in that corner and we didn't look up. If we had raised our head for a second and checked in with the rest of the group, we would have figured this out quicker. And so sometimes people do see that their gut reactions, because it's a time-bound challenge that, and we put a little bit of artificial pressure. You've got to solve this in an hour, or whatever catastrophe is going to happen. And it is fun, but people get very competitive, but it also brings out that part of personality that sometimes people push back a little bit. Again, whether that's good for the team or bad for the team. And it kind of opens it up a little bit. And then what's really fun when we do the debrief is then we also look at the answers to the survey questions that the team results were, and then see if people draw any conclusions there between these agree, disagree kind of questions and the behaviors they actually saw each other perform in that escape room, or that they've seen each other in a real life situation, of course, if they are a team that's been together for a while.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is really powerful. I tried to get my team to do one for a retreat that we had last month, but unfortunately, here in DC, I don't know if all the facilitators of escape rooms were on sabbatical or what, but we couldn't get one. So we ended up doing something else, which was fine. I think they enjoyed it just as much. But my point is that I think it's really powerful because so many things around the way people move and flow when they're out of their box, so to speak, their normal box. And that if you get to experience that with them and you get to see how they operate, their mode of apparatus. And I think that's incredibly powerful, even when it comes to well-being, because, again, getting back to this whole the philosophy around the tribe, what makes you amplified and empowered and motivated and excited and just, exhilarated for the work that you do or what you bring to your work may not be the same for the number 2 or number 3 on your team. And so it's so important to understand in a crystal clear way, what is it that gets them ignited and excited and accelerated, right? And bursting and doing their best work. And back to that point of empowering the team, you can only be as strong as your team, right? As you
Absolutely.
said, as you grow, no matter if you're a CEO or if you're leading an enterprise or you're, as you just came from, senior manager in a very large global enterprise, you can only survive if there are people that are behind you are continue to propel you forward. So I think it's fantastic that you're, having folks that are working with you participate in something like this because they get to see, hey, how somebody responds to different challenges in real time, but in a different way outside of work, but what they do to bring that forward. And then it allows you to, it's also a component, I think, of emotional intelligence, right? Because now you become very self-aware and very reflective on how you can best serve yourself and serve others. You can't ask people to do things that they're not in their skill set, not in their wheelhouse. And a brick wall trying to make something work that doesn't is ludicrous. So I think this is fantastic. So let's shift a little bit. I'd love to talk a little bit more about your organization. And, we've talked a little bit about some of the work that you've done. I always love to ask my guests, what are you most excited about as we're, rounding the second half of 2023? Are there any exciting projects or anything that is, in your vortex that you're looking forward to in your organization?
Absolutely. So I do a lot of the team coaching, and that's where I love doing, but I've been doing more speaking engagements where it's more larger groups where you can't get in and do quite as much personalized difference, but you can touch a lot more people. So I've been excited to be able to do that more. But the bonus thing I'm looking at right now is my background. I also spent about 10 years as a volunteer firefighter and emergency medical first responder early in my career when I was still going to college and then during my first role or two. And now that I've been able to look back at that, I've seen a lot of things I did and learned there that I actually ended up applying, in my real jobs. But I didn't really recognize it at the time. So now I'm kind of going back and looking at, what the fire service taught me about designing and running an effective organization. And so I'm seeing how that could turn into some speaking topics, maybe a short book or something like that. So I'm just trying to unpack that right now for myself and then see if that's something that's valuable to somebody else.
Oh, I think absolutely. You've probably heard me talk about my husband. My husband listens to the podcast and he says, "Why do you always talk about me?" And I'm like, "I'm not talking about you. I'm talking of you." But he is a firefighter. He's not a volunteer. He actually is a career fighter. He's got 3 more years. I keep saying, "What are you going to do in these 3 more years?" But I think there's a huge, as the wife of someone who is on the front lines as a first responder, I think there's a huge need for the work that you're doing in terms of making impact on that and just the resiliency that all frontline workers need, right? Not just firefighters, but, nurses, anyone that's in the EMT service or anything like that. But I definitely, and there's a component to leadership that's very different than leadership you see in a corporation, right? Because not only are they leaders, but they're also peer support. They're also, again, trying to contain themselves and manage the EI and the challenges and the anxieties and the stressors that this other person that they're helping in this moment of time is dealing with as well. So they've got everything firing on all cylinders at all moments for the 24 hours that they're at the station. And then they come home and have to kind of assimilate back into the real world. So there's so many components. I think that to your point, that you've probably learned, but now you're in an even better position to be able to go back and help and serve. And I know they look for speakers from time to time, for sure, that I think could be very powerful for you, in terms of what you're doing. So I applaud you on that. That's fantastic.
Appreciate your husband's service, and also as the spouse of a firefighter. There's lots that goes with that as well. So it definitely goes beyond just that one person. As you mentioned, it's the family, the friends, the camaraderie, sometimes the rivalry. It is a family of its own.
Absolutely. So tell my listeners, that we have listeners from all different walks of life. We have quite a few folks that are in the fire service that listen as well. So this will be great for you. But tell folks how they can get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you, and what they should reach out to you for.
Thank you very much. Best way to reach out to me is through my website. It's escapetoexpand.com, ESCAPETOEXPAND. And there you can find a little bit more about what my offerings are around teams, around speaking engagements, around general HR and project management consulting, if those are things that you're interested in. And very happy to talk to anybody, anyone that references you, Fran. Happy to give them a free 30-minute consultation if you just want to talk and see how I might be able to help one of your listeners. I'll put that offer out there. Just let me know Fran sent you, and happy to give you that free 30 minutes.
Yay. I've got some power. I got some pull, folks. So definitely say that, because I think what Chris is doing is fantastic. Plus, he's from my father's hometown, Knoxville, Tennessee. So you've got a special place in my heart for that. So that is phenomenal. And that will all be in the show notes. So for those of you who listen to the show regularly, that will be in the show notes, where you can reach out to Chris and have any questions answered that you may have around Escape to Expand. I love it. Thank you for listening today. For those of you who have joined us for the Optimized Workplace, we really appreciate you listening and tuning in. And remember, it's many monumental moments that make the biggest difference in your life. I'm Fran Dean Bishop, your host. Have a great day, everyone.